This is more horrible news out of Gaza. Israel faces mounting condemnation over the killing of Palestinians in Gaza City aid distribution melee. A distribution melee. Man, they will come up with a lot of words to skate around what this actually was, which was a massacre. It's being called the Flour Massacre because they were passing out flour, food, to the starving people in northern Gaza. So the people who were evacuated to the south, they went all the way back up to the north to get this aid convoy, this food convoy. And we're going to talk a bit about what happened. China and Turkey joined Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan on Friday in condemning Israeli forces for firing on Palestinians waiting for the delivery of aid in Gaza the previous day, with its foreign ministry calling the event, quote, yet another crime against humanity. France called for an independent investigation into the incident. We will ask for explanations, and there will have to be an independent probe to determine what happened, French Foreign Minister Stéphane Séjourné, so hope I said that right, told the country's inter-broadcast on Friday. China's foreign ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said Beijing was shocked and strongly condemned the killing of civilians, adding a call for the relevant parties, especially Israel, to cease fire and end the fighting immediately, earnestly protect civilian safety, ensure that humanitarian aid can enter, and avoid an even more serious humanitarian disaster. Israel said many of the dead were trampled in a chaotic crush for the food aid. I'm assuming that meant chaotic rush, so it's probably a typo on their part, for the food aid, and that its troops only fired when they felt endangered by the crowd. I wonder why there was a chaotic rush for the food aid. Maybe it's because 2 million people are starving, half a million facing immediate risk of famine, and there's obviously not enough food to feed everyone there. So it's kind of a first come, first serve thing, is it not? That would mean that the people would be running, not walking quietly toward the aid trucks, right? Pre-dawn video broadcast by the Al Jazeera network captured the moment gunfire erupted as thousands of desperate Palestinians gathered in the hope of receiving food as a rare humanitarian convoy pulled into the area. Tracer ammunition rounds can be seen streaking across the sky in the video from the direction of an Israeli military position. CBS News correspondent Imtiaz Tiab, sorry if I got that name wrong, reported that as the sun rose, the harrowing aftermath of the melee was laid bare. Medics say dozens were killed and hundreds injured, and doctors at Gaza City's barely functioning hospitals told CBS News the majority of the deaths were from gunshot wounds. So they were not stampeded. Most of them were treated for gunshot wounds, and the deaths were mostly from gunshot wounds. Those guns could only have been coming from one side. Of course, these people coming to the food trucks were not armed themselves. The IDF released a heavily edited clip of grainy drone video that shows thousands of people clamber around the aid trucks, which it said showed how many people had been killed in a stampede. But the IDF acknowledged that forces opened fire on a smaller group of people whom it said posed an imminent threat, quote unquote, to the soldiers. So here's a still
they're
of the
coming right at
video
us
that they're talking about. Yeah, exactly. Asked by CBS News how that threat was defined and whether any of the Palestinians had shot at the Israeli soldiers, IDF spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner said anybody approaching the forces after being warned not to was deemed to pose a threat. Witnesses don't deny a desperate rush for food in the starved city. Well, no shit. There's a desperate rush for food in the starved city, said the Israeli troops opened fire quickly and without provocation. We ran towards the food aid, eyewitness Anwar Halewa said. The soldiers then started firing at us, and so we left the food and ran. Palestinian leaders have called the incident in Gaza a heinous massacre. Let's go to one more slide here. President Biden has called it a tragic and alarming incident. Not a heinous massacre, but a tragic and alarming incident. And he spoke with the leaders of Egypt and Qatar again, with which the U.S. has been trying to help negotiate a new ceasefire and hostage release agreement between Israel and Hamas. Any agreement would also likely include a significant increase in the flow of aid into Gaza, where the UN says some 500,000 people are facing acute starvation. So under those circumstances, it's not surprising at all that they would be running towards the food aid because there's obviously not enough food for everyone.
Imagine that.
Not enough food for everyone. So yes, this is, as this slide says, a heinous massacre. You know who else didn't consider this a heinous massacre? John Fetterman. He quote tweeted this very article that we just read. And he said, I reject statements from nations with atrocious human rights records. China, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. I got news for you.
United States?
Yeah, we got a pretty heinous human rights record right now also. Without a doubt, this is a humanitarian tragedy. Hamas alone owns this calamity. We must demand Hamas free the hostages and surrender, ending suffering, death, and chaos. Once again, a full hostage exchange was already on the table. The condition was that Israel not flatten the last semi-functioning city, which it's really not. If you looked at the CNN report we showed a couple weeks ago, Rafah's already in ruins. It's just a matter of not massacring tens of thousands of more there, which is what's going to happen if they invade on the ground. But this guy, no, I reject those statements from nations with atrocious human rights records like China, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. You really think you're in a position to judge any other country for their human rights records? We're having to drop food into Gaza now. What's that?
Two of which are our allies. So
yeah, two of which are our allies. That's right.
About it.
That's right. We're having to drop aid in. We're having to drop food into Gaza now from the sky because this happened. Because the Israelis cannot be trusted to bring food to starving people without slaughtering 100 of them. That's why we're dropping aid in from the air right now. Because we can't get it to them on the ground, because the IDF cannot be trusted not to turn an aid convoy into a bloodbath.
It's just a level of human evil and willingness to support that evil that I think would have been inconceivable even a year ago, that Israel would just commit these kinds of just open crimes against humanity. And I'm not being fanciful. I mean by the legal definition. They're just constantly, almost daily, committing crimes against humanity. And to have most of the Western world just continuing to support this materially and ideologically, it just gets more and more horrifying and shocking. And for us as people of goodwill who are horrified by this and want to help these people, it's just hard to see the way forward. Yes, I think Israel is done as being a part of the family of nations. It's never going to recover from this. But that's small comfort to these poor people. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine being where they are right now?
Of course. Well, that's why the objective right now has to be to live. Like the people trapped in Gaza right now have to figure out a way to survive this. And if that means fleeing to Egypt, if Egypt will have them, and I understand that they won't at this moment, but I think the goal has to be to survive this. There will be justice for this. There will be justice for this because, as Russell said, Israel's not going to be welcome. They're not going to be a member in good standing with the world community for much longer, even with our backing. Right?
Yeah, and these desperate attempts to equate being anti-Zionist with being anti-Semitic, it's just not going to take. It's not going to take.
Of course not.
You can't just piss on everyone's leg and tell them it's raining. People can see what the fuck is happening here. It's that very, very small number of people who are just completely indoctrinated who will accept that. And I've said this from the beginning. I've seen a lot of people who normally just go along with shit, who are all like, well, Azov might be Nazis, but there are Nazis who are not going along with this. Right. This is just, it's too fucking much. You just have to be a bone-deep, brainwashed Zionist to not see that this is fucking daily genocide, that this is daily war crimes.
Yeah, I mean, this fucking piece of shit here, Hamas alone owns this. This was not a military operation, idiot. This was an aid convoy. This was a shipment of food. So what the hell are you talking about? How is anyone responsible for this but the people who were delivering the food who opened fire on the crowd?
Well,
who opened fire on the crowd.
What Sunak said in his speech, talking about now, I've been to several protests now And I never hear these people using genocidal rhetoric. Now, they will try to say from the river to the sea is genocidal, but it is not. That's a vision of one nation with equal democracy.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite.
For everybody. It's the
It's
opposite.
a statement of equality and peace and coexistence.
Right. Now, if you take that to mean the dismantling of the Israeli state as it exists, there is absolutely nothing genocidal or untoward about that. That is the correct moral position when you're dealing with a fascist apartheid ethno-state. Of course you want that state dismantled. Was it wrong to say you wanted the South African state dismantled? The Nazi state dismantled?
Exactly.
Was that morally wrong? You're
exactly. They weren't talking about the eradication of South Africa or Germany. If you notice, both of those states still exist. They don't. Right. They just don't exist as they did before because the way they did before was blatantly unjust and severely unjust. So from the river to the sea doesn't even mean getting Israel to be a different country. It just means one state, equal rights. Right? South Africa is still a state. South Africans are still a people. So is Germany. So are Germans. Right? It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that.
And if you can't accept that idea, which Israelis can't,
then you're the genocidal one. It sounds like
you're the genocidal one. I mean, we talked about that Jim Zogby poll, where when he proposed the idea of a one-state solution, both Israelis and Palestinians liked the idea. For Palestinians, it meant everybody. And for Jews, it meant you get rid of all the Arabs. For Zionists, I should say. For Israelis.
Indeed.
Please clap.